What is up, team? Welcome back to the Red Storm Rapid Reaction Podcast. I'm Pat Kane. That's Cole Atshaw. And Rick Pitino made us fans wait a little bit longer than we always want to once again. But good news did come today. This afternoon, Stanford transfer guard Oziah Sellers committed to St. John's, a 6'5 sharpshooter who becomes a third transfer recruit for St. John's this offseason. Cole, your early thoughts on Oziah Sellers?
Yeah, so Oziah currently ranked 104 in 24/7's portal rankings. Just for reference, Aaron Scott was 119 last year. Do with that information what you will. I mean, anytime you can get a career 40% three-point shooter, a career 88% free throw shooter, you take them on board. I don't know when this roster is fully fleshed out, whether Oziah will be a starting guard, whether he'll be coming off the bench, whether he's playing on the wing. No matter what, he's going to provide scoring power. So huge addition. Hopefully Isaiah is just the first of commit of a great week that we have here. Fingers crossed. Just exciting times to be a St. John's fan.
Yep, I think some more good news to come in a few short days, hopefully. We'll keep our fingers crossed there. You mentioned Aaron Scott. Both these guys ranked outside the top 100. I think we saw Aaron Scott was definitely more valuable than a guy ranked 119th at the transfer portal during the season. I think we'll see the same with Sellers this year. I think there are some similarities there in terms of how you can bring a guy in who's an experienced player, is used to playing a high level of competition and kind of fit in around other really good players. I don't imagine Sellers to be one of our top one or two leading scorers next year, at least in terms of for the longevity of the season. He's certainly going to have his nights where he is. But a guy who can fit in next to other scorers, both at guard or the forward, and be a consistent piece for a team who's trying to redevelop a roster and make it more offensive oriented this year. And I think with Sannon and Hopkins before him, now Sellers, we see some guys who can definitely put the ball in the bucket.
Yeah, I mean, last year's roster had a glaring weakness, and that was that they could not shoot the three-pointer, and they had these spells where they would go really cold. Unfortunately, happened to them in the round of 32 against Arkansas. This team will not have those same issues between Jason, between Simeon taking another step forward and shooting the ball well from deep. Now Oziah Sellers, who absolutely is a net scorcher. I mean, we will not have a problem shooting from deep. Can we retain as much of our defensive identity that we had last year? To be determined, but Rick will find a way to get these pieces to all mesh together.
Yeah, that will be a discussion. We'll certainly talk about a little bit here, and then throughout the rest of the offseason is how we'll get our defensive acumen to get as close as possible to mimic what we saw last year without the same type of defensive first players we had on last year's team. We also got to mention some departures in this landscape. Guys come in, guys also leave. And St. John saw two players transfer out this week as well. Jaden Glover and Kaman Maker both announced they're transferring. That's following on the heels of Brady Dunlap committing to St. Louis early in this week. I think that's a good level for Brady to go down to the A-10, a place that's really takes their basketball serious. He'll be able to play meaningful minutes, make an impact, and then hopefully have a chance to either have a great 3 more years at St. Louis or move up and get paid and take advantage of the system again. And then we'll see what happens with Jaden and Kaman where they land.
Yeah, you hope Jaden and Kaman find good homes similar to what Brady found in St. Louis. Kaman, we didn't get to see him much in his freshman year. Hopefully he gets that red shirt back after only playing 3 minutes all of last season. But I think that's a difficult type of practice player to replace. I mean, size 7'2", 7'3", like that's just nice to have when you're setting up scrimmages on practice day. Jaden, obviously tremendous athlete, confidence out the wazoo, the ability to shoot from deep. Again, hope both of those guys find good homes and make the right move for their careers.
So we've had 4 guys transfer out, 3 guys transfer in. If you believe in evening things up, maybe that's good news on the horizon for Ian Jackson and St. John's soon. Cole?
Fingers crossed.
Before we continue forward with our Sellers talk, Ian Jackson, have you done your transfer portal YouTube deep dive on Ian Jackson?
Have not watched college basketball scouting video on Ian Jackson yet, but I mean, we know from watching him in his high school tape when we were whispered with him last year. Just tremendous athlete. We've seen the games that he put up, multiple 20-point games at UNC last year. I find myself salivating. I think John Fanta recently released a list of his remaining transfer players in the portal. He had Ian Jackson #1.
Okay, I love it. You're not putting the mush on us yet by watching those scouting report videos too soon, waiting for him to commit, then you're going to fall asleep to him. All right, so we'll continue forward with Sellers then. I got a little graphic here to help us discuss this newest edition. 6'5", 185 pounds. He played last year at Stanford after 2 years at USC, where he played a couple seasons with our own Vince Iwuchukwu, was also roommates with Vince. Good connection to have there. I think that played a role in Sellers being interested in coming to St. John's. This past season, 14 points, 3 rebounds, a little over 1 assist a game, really good shooting splits, 40% from 3, 89% from the free throw, or 90% from the free throw line, 45% overall. And still not just a guy who gets it done from behind the arc, close to 50% from 2, over 100 made baskets from inside the arc. So a guy who's not just a guy who sits behind the arc and launches up threes, gets in the paint, makes some things happen there, and then he's money when he gets to the free throw line. We could have really used the guy last year to close out games to be a 90% free throw shooter. That's something that you can't take for granted, something I think is oftentimes overlooked. And to have a guy who's for his career, 78, or I'm sorry, for his career, something like 112, I think, and only missed 20 free throws. So, money from the line, great to see. 3-point, 59 for 147 this past season. Highest on our team was Aaron Scott with 51 threes. He was 51 for 174. So if we could see Oziah, a better shooter, increasing his volume even too, who knows what those numbers might look like for him from the 3-point line.
Yeah, I wrote down a few strengths and weaknesses, like obviously #1, shooting, clear, obvious strength for him. But you mentioned it with his ability to get to the rim. His ability to score there, shoots about 54% on shots at the rim, accounting for about 29% of his total field goals attempted. He's, as you have written down here on your graphic, tremendous in the catch and shoot, which, hey, maybe that is super intriguing to any potential point guard that might want to join this roster when you have the ability to kick the ball out to a 3-point shooter who's going to catch it and immediately put it up like that. I would have said, hey, Xavier Lee, pay attention to that. But apparently he just committed to Florida. So much for that idea. But we'll find one eventually. I mean, really the only weaknesses in his game, he's not a great shooter off the dribble. That's an area where he really struggles in. And then can Rick improve his defense? I mean, I think he does have size and length. He's got a knack sort of for getting his hand into passing lanes. Can Rick help him take another step defensively, really help bring the energy on that end? Obviously, he's going to bring it in with scoring punch and shooting ability.
Yeah, a lot of college players' statistics come down to their system and the style of play. So an up-paced team, a high-tempo team is going to see guys that have really good transition scoring numbers, and a defensive-focused team might have some ugly shooting percentages like we saw firsthand last season. But we saw Oziah be really effective getting out in transition. 67th percentile for a guy who, isn't necessarily known as just a freak athlete, more of a shooter than he is a dynamic, guy off the dribble. But showing the propensity to be able to score in transition, both at the rim or shooting off around the arc in transition, that's big time stuff with the way we like to get out and run, the way we like to apply pressure and get buckets in transition. So not only is he going to be a threat to stretch the defensive out in the half court, catch and shoot situations like you mentioned, but to score in transition, to score off steals. And what impressed me most, seeing he was 81st percentile in points per possession produced as the ball handler in pick and roll situations. So not a thing he did at a high clip in terms of on the volume, but when he did do that, he proved to be extremely capable. So not just a standstill guy, a guy that can create a little bit for himself, for others, and make the defense stress a little bit.
I wrote down a few of the really big games that Oziah played in over the course of this past season. In the ACC tournament, he played against Louisville, who at that time was ranked number 13, 22 points, 6 boards, 4 of 6 from 3, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Tremendous game against really good competition there. They played at Duke. They got mollywopped by over 30. He played 29 minutes, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 0 turnovers. And also a really good game against Florida State, which was probably an underachieving team, but certainly a team that had very high-level quality players. 37 minutes against Florida State, 27 points, 4 of 5 from 3. I love Oziah. Just mentioned some great games that he played in. Can I take a little side note and just talk about how insanely stupid conference realignment is, that we have a team, Stanford, on the Pacific Coast playing in the Atlantic Coast Conference?
Yes.
Just insanely illogical, watching these highlight videos and just be like, wait, why are they playing all these ACC teams? Oh yeah, that's right, they're in the ACC. Sorry.
Well, I guess, to their defense, their conference collapsed around them. It wasn't their choice to leave them. But yeah, ridiculous nonetheless. Some good travel time there for sure. You won't be unused to a coast-to-coast travel game. But yeah, good stuff there, Cole, as always. Let's look a little bit towards the rest of the St. John's roster and what else might be to come. We were talking before we started recording here about this roster and how it is, and we said, you got to have 5 guys out there, and Simeon isn't your prototypical point guard. I do think if we had a game played tomorrow that this 5 would be put out there as a starting 5, and you could tell me whatever guy you think is the point guard and whatever guy's the 2 and whatever guy's the 3, and there might be some, some versatility or some interchanging parts throughout the game. But anyway, these are the 5 I have right now listed. Cole, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Simeon being your starting point guard is not necessarily ideal so far. He came to St. John's with the goal of wanting to run the point. I think he is capable of it. It would take a big step year to year and a lot of playmaking increase from him, from he's shown. So that might be an issue. Obviously we look like we're going to be looking to bring in another point guard. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we find somebody. I think there is the potential if you bring in maybe Ian Jackson, they kind of run like a point guard by committee and try to have on. Sen, I think, is an absolutely elite level talent. Obviously, a 5-star kid. Bobby Hurley called him the greatest shooter he's ever seen. How much of that is coach talk? I don't know, but he's obviously a tremendous shooter. I think Sellers and him kind of fit a very similar role. I'm not sure how much of that is overlap between the two. I think in a perfect world, maybe you have them split minutes at the 2, minutes at the 3, you bring in another guard, maybe a combo guard to play the 2, another point guard, maybe whether it's coming off the bench or a starting level point guard. Obviously, you're going to have Hopkins and Zuby at your 4 and your 5, completely dominating the glass. I cannot wait to see the jump that Zuby takes next year with another off season under his belt with Coach Rick. I think I go back to a quote from Braziller where he was projecting Zuby to be a top 20 player in all of college basketball next year. And I think that's absolutely realistic. And I just am so happy for him and can't wait to see his progression next year.
Yeah, 100%. I think top 20 is, we'll see them in a lot of those preseason top 100 lists up towards the top when you have the season you had, plus the off-season buzz of just returning as a senior. I think we'll see that, and deservedly so. Agree with you on Santa and Sellers being interchangeable parts at the 2 and the 3. Be interesting to see how that shakes up. We were kind of debating before we went live. I wouldn't be surprised if Sellers gets the nod early. I lean towards that experience, and the guy averaged 14 points in the ACC last year. He's certainly capable of starting at a high major team. Sandin as well, 12 points as a freshman, comes with that blue chip pedigree. Both those guys are probably thinking that they're the guy. Hopefully that leads to good competition, not envious competition. And then we're looking to still add some guys, as you said. So the equation's always changing. And we'll see, who rises to the top, who's able to accept those roles, and who's able to, get better from it.
And we know how much Rick likes to play with his starting lineups and his rotations. I think depending on how the rest of the roster fleshes out, what this depth chart ultimately looks like with Jason and Oziah, I agree with you. I could see maybe Oziah getting the nod early. I think Jason's ceiling is astronomically higher. I think that's part of the reason why 24/7 has their rankings the way they are, with Jason being, I think, top 20 at this point, Isaiah down just out of the top 100. But nonetheless, both incredible shooters. Both will fill it up this year. Excited to see where this roster and depth chart ultimately lands, but just a tremendous addition today with getting Oziah Sellers, and excited for the week ahead. Excited for more. Give me more.
Yeah, you're right. So the targeted guys, the rumors are, they're out there, and Ian Jackson, who we discussed earlier, is the biggest target of the bunch, and certainly would come with a lot of fanfare and a lot of accolades, similar to Kadari last year. You're getting a McDonald's All-American, a New York City kid, a UNC transfer to come to St. John's would be huge news, and not just for the media aspect, but because he would change the dynamic of your team. Other than that, Lee was the point guard we were targeting. He's off the board, which is good news to have a decision. It's not, we would have loved to have him, but better this than to linger on and to stay in the hunt and not win out. We'll see where the staff turns. Obviously, we saw a Caden Lewis, a talented freshman, visit this past week. Cole loves his freshman targets. We'll see. We saw some, shout out to Dave for digging up those quotes on Twitter from Caden's father from when he committed to Kentucky. His high praise for Coach Pitino. Obviously seems like he's taken this interest from St. John's seriously. He is visiting Villanova this weekend, so stiff competition, but a guy who's a potential target and could help at that point guard spot. Not someone I think you want to just hand the keys to and not have a suitable option next to him as well. But those options are getting thinner and thinner. I've heard some talk of DJ Wagner, Arkansas guy who's not in the portal yet, so can't put all your trust or all your faith in a guy who's not even in the portal yet. We heard of the rumors with Bruce Thornton earlier in the transfer portal season, and that got us nowhere. Other than that, there's not many high major transfer targets still available in the portal who are point guards currently.
Yeah, but I agree with what you said about a Caden Lewis. I don't know that necessarily you give him the keys to the kingdom from day one, a true freshman, even a top 30, 35 kid. I don't know that you give him the starting point guard role from day one. I think that is a great option just to have a real true point guard on your roster. You bring him in, grow him over the course of the season, sit him on the bench. Again, depending on what you do in the rest of the transfer portal, do you run with sort of a point guard by committee in the early season until Caden's really comfortable and you feel good with him being out there? I mean, that's an option. You see what else happens in the rest of the time. The transfer portal, we got another 6 days for kids to potentially jump in. So we'll see what happens. I also, I wanted to read off a few quotes though from Isaiah, going back to him.
Sure.
So Dave tweeted these out. I'm not sure if they're originally from Brazilers, article today behind a paywall, man. We don't have the endless bucks from the Red Storm Rapid Reaction podcast YouTube revenue yet. So maybe Zach someday you'll get our money from that. But Oziah on MSG, I absolutely loved this quote. That arena is crazy. Just walking into it, you can feel all the history. It's kind of every kid's dream to play in there. I think when you show kids like the tape, the videos of that Madison Square Garden crowd for the Big East Championship in the tournament, I don't know how anybody couldn't be fired up about that. So totally love a kid coming in our first portal commit post Jason and Bryce to glow all about MSG like that. It's awesome. And then Pitino talking about Oziah. We're super excited to have Oziah on our join our program. Not only does he bring great experience and tremendous outside shooting, but his workout on his visit was incredible. Oziah has terrific size and an unbelievable attitude. So also love hearing about his attitude. Like, we know what a great shooter he is, but hearing that he has that great attitude. And he's coming from Stanford, so the kid's got to have a good head on his shoulders. He's got to have a high IQ. So sounds like a good Rick Pitino player to me.
And he passed the workout test, so that's a good sign. We wonder what happened with the workout with Dylan Mitchell, another target who was visiting this past week, who, we had discussed last offseason and had caught wind this past week that he was a prime target. And a lot of people thought he was leaning towards St. John's. Now the word is that he's not leaning towards St. John's and looking elsewhere. Cole, you shared with me that you were pretty disappointed to hear the news he wasn't going to be coming to St. John's. It's not, written in stone yet, so we'll see how it fully develops. But Your thoughts on not securing Dylan Mitchell and where we might go from there?
I thought you mentioned it earlier where we were talking about all these now players who are really skilled offensively, great three-point shooters, but what do we lose then defensively? I thought Dylan Mitchell could have really bolstered what you've lost defensively, whether it's through Kadari Richmond or Aaron Scott leaving. I think Dylan Mitchell could have filled a lot of those holes and filled those shoes really well. Obviously, he has flaws offensively, but like a tremendous, unbelievable defensive player who, very similar to Zuby, literally switches everything 1 through 5 on the defense. It would have been incredible to see them two literally switching everything on defense. So, maybe Rick pulls a rabbit out of his hat or something at the last second and Dylan ends up coming, fingers crossed. But, I was a little disappointed to hear that today, but who knows? It's not over. He hasn't committed anywhere yet. So
yeah, I echo a lot of the same thoughts. And it's tough to balance these fits out in terms of getting guys the minutes they want. I mean, he could go start in plenty of different big programs, and it's not so clear here with Bryce and Zuby. Could he start with the big lineup? Sure, but then we're talking again about Sandin or Sellers or Jackson not starting. So it's just really hard to shuffle, and coaches get put in a position to have to answer these questions before those guys get step foot on campus, and it's a difficult process. So we'll see how it shakes out. It seems like it's not going to go our direction, but that's also how it seemed last year with Aaron Scott before St. John's decided at the last minute it was going to make it a priority. Agree that defensively you put in with any 4 guys in any combination, and our defense will be improved. You can guard any spot. I think Prey can do a lot of the stuff he'd do on the 4 and the 5 end of the defensive side, but I don't think he's going to be as capable as Mitchell would be as guarding like real 3s and even 2s who are stud wing scorers. I think Prey will bring a lot of that interior presence that Mitchell would have, and I'm really looking forward to the increased minutes and the role this means for Prey if we don't find another inside forward. But Mitchell would have been something we don't have on this roster and would have definitely alleviated a lot of the question marks we have on the defensive end.
Agreed.
Point guard, I do think that Rick will pull a rabbit out of his hat and someone will pop loose. Maybe a coach gets fired later. Maybe there's a Euro. Maybe there's a freshman. The committee idea, I can understand. I mean, like, you've got guys who are capable ball handlers. I just am a firm believer that there's more to the position than that. And I know you're not saying that's like the right path or the only path. It just might be the necessary path. But I don't think it's enough to just have guys who can dribble the ball up in the half court and make that first pass and just go on from there. I think you got to have a natural general out there, a guy who understands time and score, guy who understands spacing, guys who understands, what it means to get guys going and how to feed a guy when he's off, or how to keep guys involved throughout the course of the game and not just focus on getting the ball across half court safely.
Well, that last point is exactly my concern. When you have this many guys on your roster that excel in the catch and shoot, don't you want like a true playmaker or a real guy who can distribute for the rest of the roster? Like, that would be ideal. Yeah, you're absolutely what I'm saying when I bring up this idea of point guard by committee. It's out of necessity. I mean, what we look at the transfer portal right now, as far as a point guard goes, there's not a ton of options remaining. Now, I think we, like you just said, Rick will find a rabbit to pull out of his hat. But if we were just squarely going on April 16th, what the transfer portal remaining looks like for a point guard, there's not a ton of options.
Yep. And Ian Jackson, who did play some point in high school, but was just so much physically more gifted than those guys he was seeing day in and day out. He wasn't going to get pressured by a 6'1" defensive point guard like you're going to see in the Big East, and he does have more than that. He averaged less than an assist this game at UNC, but he was playing next to Cadeau and 3 other really good guards who I'm running Davis, Davis, and a few other guys. So it was hard for him to rack up assists. He was spotting up, he was scoring. So I'm not going to hold those low assist numbers totally against him. I think he's got more facilitating prowess than he was able to show, but still, that's not exactly a floor general. It could be a guy who can help facilitate to get guys shots, but you need a guy who can close games and can be a guy who can do more than just score from that one spot. That's just how I feel about it. And I'm sure Rick has his strong feelings too, and that's why it's so important, why he's turning over every rock and stone and looking for a guy out there. Would Malachi Smith be looking good right now, though? I mean, that was the question we asked a couple weeks ago. It's like, do you pull the trigger on a guy like that instead of staying in the hunt for higher level guys. And, credit to UConn and credit to the Big East. We're able to get him and Demery to join forces over at UConn. Two guys, or maybe not two, but Demery we looked at, and Malachi we seemingly didn't give too much of a look. Maybe we couldn't have gotten him anyway. Maybe he was destined to go to UConn as is. But a guy like that, I really hope we don't look back with regret and say, well, we had a capable ball handler, a capable shooter, and a guy who could have set up the other 5 or 6 guys we got at these other positions.
And we missed out on them because we were big game hunting and then came up empty. Big game hunting.
Yep. And, this is what you want. I'm not second guessing the staff. We're just talking about all the options here. We're in it to win it at this point. We heard Oziah say it. We've heard Rick say it. We're targeting national championship contending stuff here. So knowing that's the goal, you can understand and you can go to sleep tonight knowing Rick Pitino is still out there big game hunting, like you said it, and not satisfied. Like Cole isn't satisfied yet with the guys we have got. Other big news, Cole, we should mention it. The shadow ban's been lifted. I'm not sure. Maybe you're a new listener, a new follower. You saw us recently. Cole and I have been doing this for years now. This is the 5th season for the Red Storm Rapid Reaction podcast. It's been going strong. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. 60,000 downloads on Spotify, over 35,000 on YouTube. So that's a credit to the St. John's fans out there. And what would have been if we weren't shadow banned, though? I mean, hundreds of thousands, perhaps, but we're past those days now. Thanks to all you guys who have been listening from the start. Thanks to all the new listeners and new followers. Please give us a subscription. Please like, reply, comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you hate. That's fine, too. For Shamari Pons, I'm Pat Kane. That's Cole Atshaw. This has been the Red Storm Rapid Reaction Podcast. Peace.